Hello. So this is the final part of the Bezier curves tutorial series that I'm doing. Uh, this one is meant to cover the multi-point uh, actor for Blueprint in Unreal Engine. Uh, this is just using vectors, not actual transforms. It's not intended to follow with rotations as accurately as you would expect with splines, because it's not a spline component. If you need that, just use the spline component. This is meant for educational purposes. Uh, we're going to be using the stuff from the quad Bezier example that we did in the previous part. And just to show you, this uses an array of points and just uses specific amounts. So there's 0, 1, 2, and 3. That's going to count as like a section for the spline. In most editors and spline points and stuff like that, it automatically creates those anchors for you and you can't get rid of them. So that's kind of the point I'm trying to drive home of, like, this is not meant to be a replacement for splines. This is meant to be as a educational exercise if you need it. And each of the anchor points affect the spline between them, or the Bezier curve between them. Also, as you can see from over here, it doesn't carry over from each curve. So this curve goes like this, and then it immediately dips under because that's how I set up the curve in that section. But it doesn't carry over from this section over and waving in kind of thing. That's kind of the part of like having a spline editor and stuff like that and fully functioning version, to modify. But this kind of follows the same principles that it does. If you want a better example, I would suggest just looking at Unreal Engine's spline component source code. It's available, it's free, it's easy to use. I'd suggest taking a look. Here's playing an editor, so this is what it looks like. Yep. All right, and this is not really going to be going over anything else actually new. This is just more of managing the memory from like specific variables to an array of variables. And the whole thing is, the way it uses it is pretty much, it has a start travel index, which is, this is the starting index of 0, and it's traveling to this point, and this kind of keeps track of like if it has valid points to use for the travel. So, and also for keeping track of where it is on the array, kind of. So what we're going to do is we're going to open up the maps, go to template, so that way I can work in there. And we're going to duplicate our quad Bezier actor. Name it BP underscore multi Bezier. Open that up. And what we're going to be doing in here is essentially deleting this variable stuff with like start anchor, and an end anchor. All right. And we're going to be deleting these arrays, or those, but we're not going to be deleting the functions. We're going to reuse these anyway. Where else are we using them? Oh yeah, in the curve. This function here for the debug is going to get significantly revamped, so expect that. So yeah, let's get started on the array of points. So let me delete these variables. And we're going to add in points, which is going to be an array of vectors. All right. We're going to name an instance editable and show 3D widget. Compile and save. And then we're going to have a new variable for start travel index. And change that to an integer. It's not an array. Okay. Next, we are going to convert the points on begin play. We're going to convert them to world space from local. And the way I designed this initially was that index 0 is actually going to always be the player's, or not the player, but the actor's like starting point. So we're going to insert at index 0 a 0 point, and then afterwards we're going to convert them into world space. So for each, and we're going to set array element, plug in the index, plug that into the execution pin, and then we're going to get actor transform. and transform location, plug in the array element and set it to that. So that way we're not removing or adding anything to the array, we're just updating its values inside of it so it doesn't break the for each loop. And now that that's done, I'm gonna comment this as setup points to world from local, and we're going to do a sequence from the blue begin play. I'm gonna plug this into here, and you'll see why the sequence in a minute. So let's update this bit right here. So the way it's intended is that let me use comments to visually show it. There we go. All right, so let's do, this is an anchor. The X's are anchors, and then let's do T as the travel points. So T. All right, so let's say this is travel point T0, travel point T1, and these are the anchor points between them. In the array, it doesn't have any way of differentiating because it's just vectors. We could make a struct for that. It's up to you. The way I did it was with vectors. So I'm counting as indexes, so this is index 0 in the array, index 1, index 2, index 3. And let's say now this is index 3, index 4, 5, and 6. I want to, the way I would actually get these points out is just by getting the array, getting our travel index, which we've already counted as 0 initially, and we would do +1, +2, and +3. So that way I can get the vectors from this array for the get location in terms of the start point, the anchor start, anchor end, and anchor point. The time, it doesn't matter because we already have that. So, and that's kind of the idea, is that this would be 0, this would be the start travel index, then this would be that +1, +2, and +3. And I would also, in my case, what I did was I turned this into a macro because it was much easier to do that than it was to basically just like copy and paste this multiple times. As you can see, it's kind of tedious. So plug that into there, copy, get Bezier points. And the reason why I'm doing this is so we can use it inside of the debug curve drawing. So that way we can just input the array, which will be this, will be vector. Plug that into there. And then the integer, which is going to be, we're going to name this travel index. And the array is going to be in points. All right, so this one is going to be, we're going to plug this in that, and then that. All right, so this would be our start. Okay, this would be our anchor start, anchor end, end. So now we just have this where we just feed in the array, we feed in our index, and we can just get our vectors from that. So if I go back to here, I can just do get Bezier points, plug that in, and there we go. And I can just, drag that up here and connect start, end, end, and everything should be good to go. And let me grab this, bring this over here. Okay. Now the way we do it over here is going to be a bit different. So this one we can get rid of inside of, well, actually another thing I just remembered was we also have to make sure we're avoiding like going outside of the array indexes in terms of like our travel points. So how do we know if our next travel point is valid or if it exists? We have to make a function for that. So is next travel index valid? Okay. And we're going to make it a pure function because then we can just input in like the integer and array, because we're going to be using it again as well, but with a separate array and integer for the function. So new parameter, it's an array of vectors. We're going to do in points. We can pass by reference because we're just checking stuff. We're not actually changing anything. So we're going to change this to an integer. In start index, same sort of thing, and return boolean, return value. So that way we know if we were successful, if our next travel index is valid or not, that kind of thing. So how would we do that? Well, since what we're doing in here is just adding 1, 2, and 3, that's kind of what we have to do for this one. But the easiest way that I can think of would be just doing a for loop, setting the starting index to 1, and then the last index to 3. So that way, when we hit this for loop, it's going to run and say index is 1. Let's check if we add... Oops, let me drag that down. If we add these and is valid index. So if it's not valid, that means we failed to find a valid travel index, so we can return false. Otherwise, return true, like so. There we go. Hopefully this didn't seem too confusing. It's really just about keeping track of where they are on the spline and just making sure, like, hey, if I finished the spline of points or whatever, don't try to go outside of that. Don't check and try to run or loop or whatever. Don't try to play again. And we actually have to do that. We have to use that for testing for playing the timeline. So we're going to do this, plug in points, travel index, branch. So if the next travel index is valid, that means we can play our timeline and we can actually move across the timeline or across the spline that we created with points. So it's pretty useful for this case. Now let's go to our draw curve. So the way we're doing the debug start is a bit different now. So we're going to get rid of actor location, and we're going to create a local variable, and we're going to name this temp sim points, because since we're simulating time, we also have to do it for the array of points now, just in case if like we're playing, if we're not playing in editor, or if we're not playing the game and it's not at runtime, or if it is, this will kind of account for that, as well as our index to keep track where we are across the simulated travel indexes. So temp underscore, what should we name it? Start index. That would be a good name, yeah. Okay, so I'm going to do a sequence. This will be part 2 of that sequence, so that way we got control of that. And we're going to set up our sim points first. So what we need to do is we're going to add, similar to how we added it 0, 0 at the beginning, we're going to do that here by doing get actor location, because right now it's an empty array. So index 0, actor location is there, but this will not work if we're playing in editor, because by the time this gets called, the points should already be in world space. So how do we check that if we're playing in editor or not? Well, if our game instance is valid, that means we're playing in editor, or we're playing the game. If it's not valid, that means we're in the editor. It's pretty simple like that, because the game instance gets initialized at runtime only. So it's pretty useful for that. All right, so now we just do, whoops. Now what we're going to do is for each point, I'm going to do this. And we're going to duplicate this over here again. Actually, we could probably just do a copy and paste and just change what's happening. So do this right here. Instead, if this is in the editor and not playing at all at runtime, then we should convert it into world space from local. So we do this. And if it is playing at runtime, then we already converted it to local, to world space, so we don't need to convert it from local. So we're good there. And now if I move this up here, comment, collect our simulated points, like so. And now what we can do is just use our simulated points array and just get index 0 as our start point, or as our start for a debug beforehand. All right, so finally another thing is that we need to add in another loop, and the reason why is so that way we can keep track of our travel points. So I'm going to drag this in, drag this over here. Is our next travel point valid? If it isn't, then we're done going through the array of points. If it is valid, then what we're going to do is use the addition method that we were doing here to get the start anchor, the anchors, and the endpoint, and get the Bezier curve from that. But we don't need to transform it in the world space because we already did that up here. So at least we're solid on that front. Next, we also need to handle the actual travel part. So we're going to do a sequence to keep the code clean. Move this up here. Connect that there. And we're going to set our start index to whatever it is +3. So that way every iteration of the while loop, it's checking like, is this index like, valid or not? If it isn't, we're done. If it is, we'll just keep going through it and getting all the Bezier curves and all that stuff. We also need to reset our time because this was originally built for just one kind of like simulated time thing, but now we're having to simulate time multiple times. So reset it every travel. And that reminds me, if we did that already, no, we did not. Inside of the timeline, we also need to deal with the travel stuff. So really all we have to do here is just increase it by 3 here, like we did in the simulation version. So plug that in there. Once we've updated it, let's check to see if it's valid. Is this? Yeah. If it's not valid, then we can't play the timeline again. But if it is valid, play the timeline again from start, where it's going to go 0 through 1, and just get the Bezier curve, location, and rotation, and just go through it. All right, so if I drag our Bezier actor into here. Let's add our points. And so this one is going to be, let's say 250, 500, 500. Let's do 750 and 1,000. All right, hit play. Yeah, it does our curve. We draw it, works fine. Great. Let's add more. So let's add 1, 2, 3. So let's do 1,000, 1,000, and let's do 500, 500, 500 on that, and then 1,000, 1,000, that. And draw curve. Yeah. Oh, right, they're using the same spot. So 250, 750, oops, 750. And it has to go within the order, so if you invert it, it starts acting weird, like that. Oh, perfect. All right, so then if I do, whoops, do this, then it starts acting really weird. And if I hit play, look at it, it follows. Yeah. So yeah, that's our curve. Let me know what you guys think of these series of videos. Let me know if there's anything I can improve on, or, you know, just give me feedback. I'd love to hear it. I hope this was helpful for anyone. Please let me know if it was. That would be really nice. Yeah, have a great rest of your day. Bye.